In this Blender video, I'll be demonstrating how to make this text using a material that I call the candy effect. I'll be using Blender version 2.79b. Let's start by creating a new project. So from the File menu, select New, and then click on Reload Startup File. To make it easier to see the scale and location of the objects that we'll be adding, switch from Perspective to Orthographic View by pressing 5 on the number pad. When we render the final image, it will be in Perspective View. Now make sure that the cube is selected and then delete it by pressing X. We're going to add the text, but first we'll center the 3D cursor in case it moved. So press Shift S and select Cursor to Center. Now press Shift A and add some text. Then rotate it on the X-axis by pressing R, then X, then 90, then Enter. Now we'll edit the text, so press Tab for Edit Mode. Then delete the default text and enter in your own text. Then press Tab to return to Object Mode. Now we're going to add a bevel, which will give it some depth and round off the edges. Since this text is going to be very glossy, rounding off the edges will allow us to have some nice reflections. So switch to the Object Data panel and set the bevel depth value to 0.07. Then set the resolution to 3 to smooth it out. Now we're going to scale the text on the Y-axis to make it thicker. So press S, then Y, then 2, then Enter. Next, we're going to make the text look a little rounder by adding a subdivision surface modifier. So switch to the Object Modifiers panel. Then add a subdivision surface modifier. Set the view and render values to 3. Before we set up the material for the text, let's add the floor and lighting. To add the floor, press Shift A and add a mesh plane. Then scale it up in size by pressing S, then 100, then Enter. Now we'll move it into position, so press 1 on the number pad for front view. Then drag the floor down until it's even with the bottom of the shortest letter. In this case, it will be the L. To set the material for the floor, switch to the Material panel. Then click the New button. Then come up here and change this from Blender Render to Cycles Render. Now click the Use Nodes button. The text will look very good against a dark floor, so keep the diffuse surface type and set the color to a hex value of 383838. This will give the floor a dark gray color. Next, we'll set up the lighting. So press 1 on the number pad for front view. Then select the lamp. Then move it to the center of the text and about 6 grid divisions above the bottom of the text. Now press 3 on the number pad for right side view. Then drag the lamp until it's about 1 grid division to the left of the center. Next, switch to the Object Data panel if it's not already selected. Make sure the point lamp is selected and set the size to 3. Then click the Use Nodes button and set the strength to 3000. This is a good time to save what I have so far. I'm going to name it candy.blend. Now let's set up the material for the text. So select the text and switch to the Material panel if it's not already selected. Then click the New button. We're going to keep the diffuse surface type. I'm going to switch to rendered view now so that we can see the changes as they're made. For the color, click the small button next to the white color and select the magic texture. Then increase the distortion from 1 to 3. To increase the detail, change the depth value from 2 to 6. Then set the scale to 0.3. Now we're going to finish setting up the material using the node editor. So switch to the Compositing Screen layout. Then click the Shader Nodes button. This is the magic texture that we just set up. I'll change the 3D view window to rendered view. To make the text look glossy, we're going to mix in a glossy material. So press Shift A and select Shader, and then Mix Shader. Drop it on the connection going into the Material Output node. Then press Shift A and select Shader, and then Glossy. Connect it to the bottom Mix Shader input. Then set the roughness value to 0. We're going to control the factor input using a layer weight node. So press Shift A and select Input, and then Layer Weight. Connect the facing output to the factor input. This will control how the diffuse and glossy shaders are blended together. The surface areas that are angled away from the camera will use more of the glossy shader than the surface areas that are angled toward the camera. Now set the blend value to 0.7, which will heavily emphasize the glossy material. Since the text has a glossy material, it will look better if we give it something to reflect. We can do this by adding a background pattern. So switch to the World panel. Then click the Use Nodes button. Now click the small button next to the gray color and select the checker texture. Then change the Color To value to black. I'm going to make the pattern larger by reducing the scale value to 1.5. Now switch back to the default screen layout. I'm also going to switch back to solid view. Next, we'll set up the camera view. So press 0 on the number pad for camera view. This is the view looking through the camera. I'll zoom in a little. Now I'm going to lock the camera to the view. To do that, press N to open the Properties panel and put a check mark next to Lock Camera to View. Then press N again to close the Properties panel. Now I can zoom, pan, and rotate while looking through the camera. Now I'll set up the view that I'd like to use. I'll switch to rendered view to see what this looks like. Everything looks good, so we're ready to set this up for the final render. So switch to the render panel. Set the resolution to 100%. This will make the final render 1920 by 1080. Now open the sampling section. This is where you can set the number of render samples. The larger this value is, the better the final image will look, but the longer it will take to render. I'm going to set it to 500. Now I'm going to save the project. It's a good idea to do this before rendering in case something goes wrong during the rendering process. Now we'll render the image, so from the Render menu, I'll select Render Image. If you want to stop the rendering process before it's done, you can press the Escape key, or you can click the X next to the Render Progress bar. This is going to take several minutes to render, so I'll pause the video until it's done. Rendering is finished, and this is the final image. To save the image, go to the Image menu and select Save As Image, or you can press F3. I'm going to name this image candy.png. If you want to return to the 3D view, then click this menu and select 3D View. To go back to the rendered image, click the menu and select UV Image Editor. Well, that concludes this video. Thanks for watching, and please subscribe and leave a comment.